I'm Stephen Henderson, and we have a great show coming up for you on One Detroit. We're going to look at a new report that reveals a gap in access to the arts for people of color here in the city, plus a musical work with a powerful message performed by the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club. Also ahead, a closer look at the ancient art form of henna and how it's really good for your health. And then Ardex Detroit explores what it means to live during these changing and uncertain times. Stay tuned. That's all ahead on One Detroit.
Support for this program provided by W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Hi, and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, sitting in for Christy McDonald. Although we're living in unprecedented times due to the pandemic, Detroit Public Television is working to bring you just a little bit of normalcy with stories about arts and culture in our city. Coming up, I'll talk with Nate Wallace from Knight Foundation's Detroit office about a new study on the racial and economic barriers to the arts. Plus, University of Michigan's Director of Choirs, Dr. Eugene Rogers, talks about a powerful musical work that pays tribute to Black men killed by police. Also ahead, the amazing work of an artist who uses henna to paint body art that depicts life stories. And then Ardex Detroit uses visual and performing arts to explore life in the city during these changing and uncertain times. And we'll wrap it up with a performance by jazz saxophonist James Carter. It's all just ahead. Nate Wallace of the Knight Foundation, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
So let's start with this piece that you wrote recently about equity in the arts and how important it is. The Knight Foundation and the Urban Institute recently did a study about the importance of arts in connecting communities and found some, maybe not surprising, but pretty glaring racial disparities.
Yeah, the report was commissioned, and we found that Blacks did not have as much equity or as access to the arts as whites. And in this moment, where we all have a moment to just kind of pause and reflect, I thought it was important to talk about it. And one of the things that's absolutely been important to me is the arts, in my life. And the op-ed was actually based on a Facebook post that I did in 2014, where I actually saw this mother and her son, have this moment in front of this Kehinde Wiley piece. Mm-hmm. And the son, seen this piece called Officer of the Hussars. And he looked up the piece and he looked and he said, why is he there? And the mother literally it was really casual. The moment was maybe 5 to 7 seconds. But the mother said really casually, because he's supposed to be. And I thought that was such a profound moment, especially in a time right now where we're all kind of forced to kind of do some introspection within ourselves. We've had this moment. There is no sports. There are no outside distractions that's kind of taking us away from the moment that we're in, this moment of uprising. So we have to wrestle with the fact that there is gross inequities, in our city.
Talk about the things you see that represent disparity, even in the face of the progress that's represented by Kehinde Wiley or Bearden in the DIA.
Well, I think that specifically Kehinde Wiley, his work is framed around um, Black bodies being in positions that they're not commonly used to being seen in. Um, so while I think that the DIA and MOCAT has done some really great things, while I think that Ford produces a really great car, at the same time, if there's a protest going on within those institutions, we got to look beyond, the exterior. We got to look beyond these really front facing things and really get to the heart of it. One thing that Detroit is an 80% Black city. And while we're talking about diversity, while we're talking about inclusion, and while we're talking about equity, we have to lead these conversations. We have to lead these conversations. We have to push these conversations. And it's uncomfortable. And, growth is always uncomfortable. And, it's a hard conversation to have. But at the same time, I love our museums. And I think that one thing that James Baldwin said, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but he said, "I love America, therefore I have the right to critique her perpetually." And I love the DIA. I love MOCA. I love our institutions. And therefore, I think that it's our right to actually critique them and make them better.
Yeah. So talk a little about the role of philanthropy, I guess, then in trying to push that and trying to push our institutions to think more about themselves and think more about how they fit into this narrative of inclusion and equity.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really excited about, and I've been in this position for maybe about 7 months now. So it's been a wild ride in my philanthropic career coming in at this moment. Yeah. So one thing that we're really thinking about is how do we include equity in every single piece of grant making work that we do. Even though our work is not based around racial equity, how do we make sure that racial equity is included in the DNA of what we do? So how do we make sure that our grantees have a diversity strategy? How do we make sure that Black leadership is being given the capacity to actually carry out the mission of the organizations? How are we scaling up those individuals who may not necessarily have the budgets to support $100,000? Where are those organizations at that have a $50,000 and less budget to do the work that they need to do, and how are we thinking about them? So these are just a couple of the things that we're thinking about as we kind of do our work, and equity is just embedded in our Detroit strategy going forward.
7 Last Words of the Unarmed is an original choral work by composer Joel Thompson that uses the last words of Black men killed by police or other authority figures. The work premiered in 2015 with a powerful performance by the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club, directed by the school's director of choirs, Dr. Eugene Rogers. Aaron Dworkin of Arts Engines talked with Dr. Rogers about the work's compelling message and why he decided to present it at the university.
You have programmed some phenomenal works, and I thought I would just start right off the bat. One of those, of course, is the 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. For our viewers who may not be aware of it, could you first just kind of share what is the work? And then I kind of want to delve into the programming aspects of it.
Sure. 7 Last Words of the Unarmed is a multi-movement work originally written for tenor and bass ensemble with chamber strings and piano that basically uses the last words and correspondences of Black men or young men who were killed before their time by authority figures or police. Joel Thompson is the amazing composer of that work, and I had the real honor and privilege of working with him and championing that work. So that work really changed both of our lives in some way. And so, and honored that it has had, now I feel like it's getting its due recognition for the powerful message and work that it is.
Just wondering kind of your thinking as a leader in terms of why did you program it to begin with, and were there risks?
I think the sky is the limit with programming, and we really limit ourselves when we only go to the status quo. I'm always a fan of trying to find new voices and emerging composers. You know, Joel was only 25 then when the work came to me, and really he wrote it never to be performed. And so I have to be honest, when I first got the work, I sat on it because I wasn't sure at that time, 2015, you know, Black Lives Matter was not as universally recognized as it is now. And so after I couldn't step away because the work spoke to me on so many levels. First and foremost, as a musical work, it was absolutely brilliant the way Joel used so many different compositional devices to set those words. But then as a man of color, African-American man, it just grabbed my heart. And I realized if I was going to program this work with a group of individuals who are not men of color, that we had to find the universal connection. And once I found that and the students were on board with that with me, I knew that we could go on that journey together. And even though some people said, you know, why would you do this work? I just believe if you can find the commonality and the message that unites us all. And for this piece, it was loss of life. Regardless of how it happened, we all can at least agree that any life that's lost is something to be mourned, right? And so with that, we forged ahead with our students and we framed it Love, Life, and Loss. And the response really was overwhelmingly positive.
You are so passionate about what you do and about our art form. And I'm just wondering, where does that come from initially? And the second part of that is, how do you maintain it?
I have made my hobby my career. I mean, I love music and I love people, and I would do these jobs if there was not even a paycheck. That to me, when you get the chance to work with people who are interested in being together and you working with great music, I mean, that for me feeds my soul. And I could do that all day long, really, if the combination of that. And of course, having so many different venues through the Washington Chorus, you know, Exigence and the University of Michigan. So I feel like I get different perspectives at different ways to communicate the art form, and that also helps. And sustaining it, to be honest, Aaron, I think the way to sustain it is constantly making sure you're doing it because you love it. And when you don't love it, you need to find something else to do. And I'm committed to that.
So how much do you know about the ancient art form of henna? It's a plant-based dye that's used to create designs on canvas, as well as on the skin and on fingernails and fabrics. Henna is an important part of the Indian culture, and henna body art is very popular with brides. The team at Detroit Performs learned all about the history and the health benefits of henna from artist Hannah Lydia Wilson.
I think any field, any art, it has to give hope, a sense of living to the person who is seeing it. Not depress them, but encourage them. I grew up in a place called Hubli. It's in Karnataka, South India. In India, it's not really common that people study fine arts. But for me, I always loved design, and any empty space, me designing was my thing. Nature taught me so much more than what textbooks taught me. The way how wind moves, the way how actually Psalmist describes nature really well in the Bible. And that really moved me. I mean, if he was able to make songs out of it, why was I not able to do something with paint? That really triggered my brain. Henna is an ancient art form. In Indian culture, all the brides apply that, like up till here. It's really crazy, but it takes about 7 to 8 hours just to work on their hands and their feet. The reason why they do it is they think it enhances the bride. It's just like an adornment to yourself. And it has a lot of health benefits too. It cools down your body temperature, and it's more like a spa treatment because of the oils and all the beautiful aromas you get in the henna. There's a chemical reaction that happens in the paste. After 5-10 minutes, the stain starts releasing. So it reacts with your skin, which is perfectly normal and organic. It's nothing to be alarmed of. So the longer I keep the henna paste on my skin, the longer the dye releases. So I started doing henna when I was 10 years old. My neighbor was a Muslim, and it was her wedding, and she got her hands all decked up with henna up till here, and that amazed me. And after 2 days, her stain was still there. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I mean, it just doesn't go off. I mean, I want to do that too. There are different applications also. People use a needle-based tube to do henna here. I prefer cone. Cone is nothing but a plastic roll that you roll and then you tape it with a pin. So the pin gives a proper diameter for the thickness and thinness. I like to work with a fusion of thin and thick lines, so it gives a lot of depth, I feel. There are a few traditional designs. For brides especially, we do a lot of portraits in henna, like the bride with a dupatta on her head. The rich heritage and the rich culture, which is in India, many people don't know in Detroit. So when I do those designs, they're like, oh, what is this? What kind of design is this? What kind of an art form is this? So when I explain them, they're aware of the culture. They're aware from where it came. Other forms are like the Arabic forms, more like contemporary forms. When I do brides, I use the embroidery which is on her dress. So I use those as my inspiration. And the love story of the bride. I mean, how the bride met the groom, where did they meet, what is the common thing between them. I sit with them for 8-9 hours and they explain me their entire story. And as they explain their story, on the spot I build the story up in the henna. I think that lightens them and they feel good about it.
And finally, Ardex Detroit is a citywide cultural arts series that kicked off last year with 22 newly commissioned exhibitions, performances, and events developed by past Kresge Artist Fellows and Gilda Award recipients. The theme is Living X, and the projects all reflect what it means to live and create amid the changing landscape and narrative of the city and its neighborhoods. One Detroit's Bill Kubota spoke with Ardex Detroit curator Suzanne Charles.
Suzanne, thanks for talking to One Detroit.
Thank you so much for having me.
But let's do a little background first. What is Ardex Detroit?
So Ardex Detroit really began, and most people will be familiar from it, from the 3 editions that Midtown Detroit spearheaded and led through 2011 and 2015. Most of the projects really centered on the 36 Kresge Artist Fellows and then the 2 eminent artists of every sort of cycle of that program. And it really was an opportunity for those artists to showcase their work within the sort of Midtown, downtown, and Eastern Market footprint. So always new commissions, always jam-packed events, either over 5 or 10 days. So it was a real opportunity to sort of reimagine this as a platform that could take place in the neighborhood.
Art out of the neighborhoods of Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park, curated as Living X, the X a multiplier in math terms, but also for an undefined value. Suzanne Charles says we've been living in unprecedented times, even before the coronavirus. Living X would reflect urgency and the emergence of artists of the neighborhoods. And then you end up with 22 projects, art projects. That's seems like a lot.
It definitely is. I think one of the things that we really embraced about this idea is that if we were going out into the neighborhoods, we didn't actually have to sort of adhere to the idea of a traditional festival format where it took place within, either a single month or a 5 to 10 day period. We could really sort of think about this as a sort of decentralized kind of festival where the artists themselves could be supported to self-produce projects in neighborhoods that they're familiar with, that they either live in or work in, or really had important stories to tell from.
Well, let's talk about a few of those projects. What really stands out in your mind? I know above
Right.
the others. There's so many.
Above the others.
Sure you don't.
Well, I can never say above the others, but what I will say is what really struck me was the diversity of the kind of stories coming out of neighborhoods and coming out of, the way that artists sort of are already part of community. And I think one of the ones that stands out for me really is Fly Drown, and the way that, they invite, an audience into these really intimate Black domestic spaces, based on the kind of vernacular single family home, but then really show the way that those spaces were the spaces where you could process grief, you could process trauma, you could process the lived experience of having to walk outside that door into a city that sometimes wasn't really welcoming. But inside those interior spaces, it was really a place where you could sort of feel the full soul of the Black experience in Detroit.
There were some others, including Neighborhood on the Edge. Talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, so Neighborhood on the Edge is, again, these unique stories and audio portraits coming from people who are currently living in a neighborhood that's going through so much influx and so much transformation, right? Especially as we sort of consider the redevelopment in that town.
There were some films involved with Living X this year.
Yeah, we do have a couple film projects, and one of them is by Julia Yazbek, who is an artist who really was documenting and wanting to kind of tell a story about two very, very different, but also very similar cities that, both form a part of her sense of belonging and identity. Those cities were Detroit as well as Beirut in Lebanon, as a result of both the work that she's already doing, but also, of course, with the events of the day. And I think that that's really some of the power of the work that artists do in ways that are often unexpected. They can be very prescient about what our world is telling us, right? And what's happening, both intimate scales and really sort of grand and narrative scales.
The Living X exhibition's done, except for a few that couldn't be finished because of the pandemic. This month, it's a look back at what was. More from the artist, a book, a podcast discussing the work, and an online event on Wednesday.
So that'll all come out. The book and the podcast series will kind of launch at the same time through an event on August 19th from 6:30 to 8, where we'll also have an opportunity to not just, showcase both the book and the podcast, but to really also, again, do what we do best, which is let the artists speak for themselves.
Well, Suzanne Charles, Living X curator with Ardex Detroit, thanks for talking to One Detroit.
Thank you so much.
That'll do it for this edition of One Detroit's Arts and Culture Show. Check us out at onedetroitpbs.org. We're going to leave you with a throwback performance by saxophonist James Carter and the Don Was Detroit All-Star Review at the 2012 Concert of Colors. Enjoy, and we'll see you next week.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.